Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherry Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherry.
And today we are talking about something that for a long time has been on my mind. And with the people I work with, it has been an interesting topic and a very important one. And so we are talking in this podcast and likely into the next because of the amount of information I would like to cover and we have talked about in preparation. But the subject is our values. So values, when I'm working with people, often what will happen, and Sherry sees this too, I'm sure, is people will come in and they are not happy.
Yes.
There's depression, there's anxiety, there's a lot of things going on. And I've found that it's really helpful to connect this back to values.
Mm-hmm. Discontented with life, not getting what they want.
Not getting what they want, not happy where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that if I ask people, what are your values? It's often kind of a confusing question. I'm not sure what that means exactly. And they will maybe identify some values that they think are important.
Should be important.
They're like, right, growing up, they've heard a lot about.
Yes.
But if I ask them if they're living that value, then that opens up a discussion that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And so I've been learning that really understanding what your values are and why is a part of being happy. I do believe that if we are living our values, we will be happy. It's almost like we can't be unhappy.
Right.
Even if everything around us is not the way we want it, and our circumstances and situations and the people in our lives are going in the opposite directions we want, if we are going to bed and living our values, we will be okay.
Yeah.
And so
at the end of the day, you can say, I lived my values today.
It's an important concept.
It is. It's a really important concept. I'm glad we're talking about it today.
So a lot of people that I work with will come in, and it's often because something has happened. Obviously, you know the podcast topics and where we've come from.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So someone I may work with is struggling with addiction, let's say. One of the most important things I believe they need to do early in this process is accept that they are not who they think they are. And this is their values. Not their worth or value, which we've talked a lot about. And hopefully...
Remember, your worth is 100% no matter what.
Yes. Hopefully there's a separation for you in your mind, at least, of human being and human doing. And these are different. And the doing is important because it's our quality of life. It's our quality of relationships. But our human being is 100%, which is the hope and motivation to keep going because you really are okay. So I've been learning a lot lately that people are not who they think they are because they don't follow the values they think they have.
Yes.
It's really interesting.
Everyone does that to a certain extent, right?
Right.
Like we want to be a person who exercises every day.
Fitness is a value, right?
Yes. And yet, things happen or, we get busy or it's just kind of drops off our radar a little bit.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good example. Most people would value health and fitness, and yet, not very many people actively work to live that value.
Yeah,
and this isn't a judgment. This isn't you're in trouble if you don't. The point is that whatever your values are, if you don't live them, you will not be happy. Something will be undone or unsettled or discontent.
It's disconnected from who you are.
Right.
This is the person I've chosen to be, and yet I'm not living in a way that connects with that. It really is the fundamental concept of integrity and how critical that is, right? When we talk about the integrity of a bridge or a building, right? That it's critical that that integrity is solid and intact, that there aren't disconnects or flaws with that structure. That affects the structure itself. If it's a bridge, it affects everyone that crosses that bridge back and forth. And so to have that centered space where you are who you believe you are and who you say you are, it is an absolutely critical piece for your life and also for the lives of those who depend on you and who are connected to you.
Exactly. I kind of think that integrity is sort of the ladder that all other values hang on, because it's so crucial.
They have to, because without that, you're disconnected, right? Like none of those values mean anything. You can say I'm this way, but if you haven't connected it with integrity to your soul and to your being, and you're connecting your being and your doing, really, it's that kind of connection there, then you don't really have the values. You can say you have it, but it's not really a part of who you are.
And I'm surprised, Sherry probably is too, when someone comes in and they have not clearly been living their values because of their behavior.
Right.
But they honestly feel like they are that value.
Yes.
It's an interesting, and you pointed out almost like you don't want to be mean or something. It's like, so you're saying this and you're doing that. So you're teaching your children, for example, to be honest, or to be
to be
moral,
honest,
or chaste, or sexually disciplined, or whatever. But you're struggling with that.
But you're living this different way.
But you believe you have that value, and it's this really interesting sort of dichotomy. And what I found is that they really want to believe that they are the values they say they have. And it's hard for them to confront it and say, you're right. And it's almost gotten to the point, and I know we've talked about this before, if you remember Steps to Recovery, I think it's episodes 2 and 3. Step number 1 for the person in addiction is honesty. And part of that says accepting that you are not who you thought you were.
Right.
Or think you are. And that is an important realization, very humbling, very painful, but it's a good start.
And the truth is, whether you're an addict or the betrayed spouse or someone else dealing with other things in your life, you have to look at this, right? You have to look and see, am I actually living my values? Am I actually the person that I say that I am?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, David and I have to do this, right? This is not just, everyone has to look at this concept and say, okay, wait, hang on.
I have to do it a lot, actually.
Right? I know. That's the thing. I'm like, I've done that this week, right? Like, am I the person that I have decided that I am? Do I do the things that would indicate that? Do I have that in my center, in my core, right? Whether it's something like I am a person who meditates daily, right? And then I've missed 4 days in a row because things get crazy or whatever.
A good one for me, I talk a lot about being loving.
Right.
And this means that I need to be loving myself. I mean, obviously it's an important value of mine. However, when I'm unloving towards my kids or others, it means a lot to me.
Right.
And I keenly struggle with being the kind of person that I want to be. But I do have this value. What I'm learning about my values is that if I am going to bed, for example, and reviewing the day's events, and I value being loving, and I can't really think of when I was especially loving, but I can't think of when I was unloving, I'll still be happy with that. I'll still be okay. But if I can think of examples where I was unloving, then I will not be happy. And so these values aren't something necessarily that we really live in some showy, obvious way every day, but we won't be happy if we're going against them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the difference, right? So if I value integrity, maybe I didn't talk to very many people and I didn't have to like be honest or speak truth at any point, but I wasn't dishonest. And so I'll still be happy with that.
Yeah. So you're kind of in this okay
As long as you're
spot.
not going against your values.
Right. Well, and I think there's a space too where we can be happy if we're not living our values, if we're fixing it as we
Right.
go, right?
Right.
Because
We're aware of it and we think about it.
obviously this is a process. You know, we're not going to be 100% perfect at every single tiny little thing that we do. You know, I value being present. Oh boy, when I get stressed or very busy or hard things are going on in my life, I am so much less present with myself, with my children, you know, with
Right.
other people, right? But if we're growing through that, right? If we're aware of it and we're paying attention and we say, okay, now what can I do? How can I be? How can I shift that? How can I sit down and, you know, apologize when I've been unloving or apologize when I haven't been present? And then what do I need to do to shift in my life so that I can be more present? Then we're okay.
Right.
Then we're still in that place of integrity, because even when we aren't able to fully live the way we want to, we are accountable for it and we're working on it and we're fixing it and we're moving forward. So hopefully you're, you know, not sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I can't have values because I can't be perfect 100% of the time
Right.
in all of these ways. But it's this process that the more that we are living in accordance with what we value, the more that we're going to feel satisfied, centered, grounded, and at peace with ourselves and with the world, which is truly what everyone's looking for. I mean, that's what everyone wants, right?
Right.
And we fill it with a lot of different other things, but
Which brings up a really good point. So if we are either not aware of our values, don't think about them very often, or don't have them, what happens?
lots of things.
This is good, I think, because we see this a lot with the people that we work with.
Right.
In place of values that are meaningful. Meaningful is in, I think everybody would say they value certain things like honesty,
Right.
but not
Or loving
meaningfully
people
lived.
or, yeah.
Not like they're thinking about it. They don't reflect about it. They don't ponder about it. They're not,
hey, was I
am
honest?
Yeah.
You know?
And so they can say they value it, but in reality, not really thinking about it, which means probably not really living it. Mm-hmm. And so what happens for them? I've noticed a couple
Distress.
of things. Distress. For sure. What I've noticed, and Sherry can speak to this too, you sort of have something else that takes the place of your values. Because, you know, we have some kind of guidelines somehow, some way for how we live our lives.
Yeah. You can't just have a vacuum there.
Right. No vacuum. So what I've noticed happens is you become hedonistic, which is just pleasure seeking, what feels good.
Yes.
Um,
Isn't that
and-
an interesting commentary on our society? Not to
Yeah.
interrupt your flow of thoughts, but you see
Well,
that
it's
a
never
lot
been
in
easier.
society, right?
It's never been easier to be hedonistic because
And
everything we
that's-
could want is readily available.
And that's kind of the concept of life in a lot of ways, is it's just do what makes you happy, do what feels good.
Right. Yep.
Live your own life, YOLO.
You do your thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And it makes sense. If you don't have values,
Right.
it almost becomes, you know, in light of not having a vacuum, it becomes something else. And doing what you want and what feels good, I've noticed, is a good something else, as well as, and there's a combination of both often, your motivation is to avoid pain. And so
Yes.
anything that hurts, anything that's hard, just avoid it at all costs. When you think about living your values, there's going to be some hard things you have to experience because you're living your values. I mean,
Right.
we talked about fitness earlier. Well, it is not easy to get up at 6 a.m. and go to the gym and to eat healthy when you crave certain foods so bad. There's nothing easy about that. However, if you don't have strong values or you don't live your values, then it will become, what do I want to do? and how can I avoid what hurts?
Yes.
Which is natural, by the way. This isn't like,
Yes.
you're a bad person if this is the case, or if this is where you find yourself. If you're going to do an honest, searching, fearless moral inventory, perhaps you've shifted into some of this stuff where I live my life based on avoiding pain and just kind of what feels good.
Right. I mean, how many times do people walk in the door from a crazy, stressful day at work and go open the fridge? Or, okay, well, I need to get this project done, and there's a deadline, and I got to get it done, and then, well, let me go call this person. Let me go run this errand. Let me go do, something else that feels good to kind of avoid that situation, right? So we all do it to a certain extent. We just want to be aware and conscious and present in our lives and notice, okay, whoa, hang on. And is this taking me away from what I value?
Yeah. And does it matter? Does it really matter if I'm someone who lives my values or not?
Yeah.
We talked about to get versus be.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
So this concept it really goes to this point of when we're trying to have values versus not having values. A lot of times people will say that they have values or try to have values because they quote unquote should have a value around something, and normal society believes and values honesty, values fidelity, values spirituality, values all of these different things. And so if I'm a quote unquote normal good person, then I'm supposed to have these values. But if you're not really living those values, then you're kind of in this checking boxes kind of space to appear to have those values, either to yourself or to someone else. So you may think, oh, I go to church and I'm checking that box. I'm box checking church because then I'm demonstrating that I am a spiritual person.
I'm responsible. I'm spiritual.
Yes.
I can do hard things.
Yes.
Which we value. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And we see that regularly. I think both of us see that with clients or other people that we're working with, where they are kind of doing this box check kind of thing. Like, look at me. I have these, I am this kind of a person, right? Same thing with being responsible. See, I go to work and I provide financially for my family members. I'm doing all these things. I buy them stuff. I get them cars. I do these different things. And it's this box check of providing, box check of being a responsible human being, being a generous person, right? When it's this superficial layer and isn't truly what's going on underneath, right? So they're trying to get something. They're trying to get an image, get a standing, social standing, have this appearance of, whether it's for themselves or to have other people think that about them, and they really aren't truly that person inside.
And isn't that interesting that they value that over actually just being that?
Yes.
So having that value is not as worthwhile to them as people thinking you have that value.
Yes. Being able to put up that kind of, that front of having that value, right? Like I think of a story that a religious leader talked about a little while ago about Queen of Russia, right? Going down the river. She's going down a river, seeing all of the industry of all of her people, right? And the people that are setting this up, it's actually a fairly poor area, and they're not really providing anything. They're not really doing anything, but they want to be able to demonstrate that this is happening. So they literally put up all of these facades of buildings and people working hard in the fields and all of that, so that it would look like that's what was happening, and it was a far enough distance that you really couldn't tell. And so then as soon as that that boat would go around the bend, they would quick hurry, pack it all down, take it all down, stick it on the carts, and they would take it to the next time that they would come around another bend and then put it up really fast.
That building looks familiar.
Yeah, it would look like all of this stuff was happening. And that was more important than actually doing what was necessary to help the communities build and create for themselves. And that, I think, happens sometimes. That is the value, is appearing that way, having the image of, or the power and control over what is going on and what is happening, right? And so that's an important thing, is there's a huge difference between just being and those things just happen in your life. You just do those things naturally because that's who you are, versus this sort of grasping space of trying to get things, get the appearance of things, trying to make everything sort of fit together, try to make sure that you can get money, get that, look, get where people think you're this way.
Right.
And it's an exhausting process.
It sounds exhausting.
Yeah, to think about, like, oh man, you're just constantly in this space where you're trying to manage and control and make sure that you have these values, that people see that you have these values.
And this fear, and I hear this a lot too, people that come in,
right,
of I'm going to be discovered.
Which is the motive, right, to keep doing it.
As a fraud.
Yes.
And so I have to keep this up, otherwise
people are going to know.
People are going to know.
And that's the thing, is when we talk about trying to avoid pain.
Yeah.
Right? This is a false sense of security, right? And there's all of this pain associated with a fear and inevitable discovery, right? Where people see that you aren't this way.
Right.
That is so much more distressing. And actually, if you look at that, yoga theory, the XYZ, where we have the same amount of energy and you just choose where you want to put it, right? It looks harder and more energy filled to have to be this person, right? Than to just sort of fake it and just show up at church and, just show up, at your job, or however it is that you have to demonstrate this. But in reality, when you think about the exhausting nature of trying to maintain all the time
and keep track of it,
it's the same amount of energy just to be.
And then when you are discovered, your go-to is to lie and deceive and gaslight, because you can't be discovered as a fraud. And so you've got to really fight tooth and nail to maintain this facade, which is exhausting.
Yep.
I think if you look back on your life at the times that you were the very happiest, whether that was in college or whether that was at a certain job, or
the most content.
The most content, for sure. Good chance you were really living a value or multiple values, like really living them. So I think about when I was in college with a young family, and looking back now, that was hard, but it was also really satisfying. And I was working very hard, and I was on top of some really important things that are important to me based on my values.
Yes.
And I'll bet you it's the same for you if you think about the best times in your life. And it could be just one value. It could be like hard work. And you were just really, really living it, though, like really living it, or being honest, or being responsible, or being, or learning, whatever it is, because that's the thing. They're your values. They don't have to be what they're supposed to be based on somebody else. It's your values.
Yeah.
But I'll bet you that was some of the happiest times in your life, living those values.
Absolutely. There's a reward that comes from being. There's that contentment that it is in and of itself, just to be is a reward.
Right. It really is. And so convincing the people that we work with, convincing them that, first of all, knowing your values and really living them will be your best place, your highest and best self. And so that leads into, well, if someone is coming in, maybe they have some values, but only because they've been told their whole life that these should be their values. But everybody's a little bit different. And believe it or not, there are a lot of values. A lot of values. And so how do we figure out what ours are, what to be true to? I think that this is an important concept.
Yeah, and how to live them even more strongly.
Yeah, how to strengthen them. So more to come on that. Next episode, I want to go through some things with you where you might be taking notes. We want to go through some things with you where you will be taking notes and review some things. So stick around. This is really good. But for this episode, we just wanted you to think about living a value-centered life, not a pain-avoidant life or a pleasure-seeking life, but a value-centered life. Let everything else fall where it may. You will be absolutely the most fulfilled, the most content if you do. And how exactly we will talk more about
Next time.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, we'll see you. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.